Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Uzma, and I am the Associate Director for Graduate Recruitment and Conversion at the Faculty of Graduate Studies at York University. I'm really glad that you're here today. Uh, we're going to be hosting this session all about helping you become more clear on possibly a future at York University and what this means for you as someone coming from the US. So we'll walk through a little bit on information that we hope to glean from some of our wonderful students already at York, some of the key factors that they consider that they would Apologies, technology issues. Okay, just in case you missed it. So we're going to be walking through some information that we're going to have from prospective York students who are already, here from the U.S. Some of the key factors that they were considering when they decided to study abroad, why they decided to choose Canada as a study destination, what was really the tipping point for them to decide that they wanted to one day graduate from this wonderful institution. So feel free to drop your questions in the chat anytime. This session is for you, and my hope is that you're going to leave feeling more informed, confident, and excited about your next steps. I'm going to take a pause so that my wonderful colleague Eileen can go through the land acknowledgement. Also on the session, we have Gabriella from the recruitment team to help support any questions that you may have that we can continue to answer in the chat.
All right, so yes, welcome everyone. And first we'll just do a land acknowledgement to honor the land and the caretakers of the land that we are currently on at York University. So York University recognizes that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. We acknowledge our presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Toronto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabeg Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It's now home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which is an agreement to peaceably care and share for the Great Lakes region. Okay, so now we'll get started with the presentation.
Thank you so much, Eileen. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go through our panelist biographies just to introduce them. When I say your name, I'd love for the panelists to just put your video on and just maybe wave if you feel like it. Right, so first up we have Joey Hilliard. Joey is a first-year master's student at York University, and they're focusing on experimental laser physics. So they graduated summa cum laude from the Honors Tutorial College at Ohio University with a BS in astrophysics, where they completed a thesis on asteroid rotational properties. Joey served as president of OU Society of Physics students and spent several years as a peer tutor in math and physics. They have presented research at AAS and DPS with interest in experimental optics and planetary science. As an openly queer scientist, Joey is committed to showing that queer people belong in STEM. After their master's, they plan to pursue a PhD in astrophysics. Next up, we have Justin Taylor. Justin grew up in Missouri before moving to Georgia for high school, university, and then work. He graduated with a BA and an MA in applied linguistics from Georgia State University, located in the heart of Atlanta. He has also lived and taught in China and Turkey before moving to Toronto to start a PhD in applied linguistics. He's an English teacher by training and trade, interested in sociolinguistics, critical pedagogy, and queer theory, and looking to transition into teacher training and education. After a year in North York, he now lives downtown with his partner, dog and cat, and plans to settle in Toronto permanently. Now we have Katrina Matheson, and I'm going to go through a little bit more. Sorry, my screen. Apologies for that. Okay. Inspired by emerging socio-technical shifts in global politics and social relationships wrought by artificial intelligence, she returned to graduate school at York to pursue an MA in Science and Technology Studies in 2021, following a 20-year career in finance and distribution of premium film and television content. Through geographically distant, from her California origins, her return to graduate school was an intellectual homecoming and a seamless continuation of her undergraduate degree in science, technology, and society from Stanford University, where she did a BA in 2001. Now, as a PhD candidate, her research interests cluster around artificial intelligence and related elements and include philosophical, political, and socioeconomic dimensions. Her dissertation research examines the potential role of third-party liability insurance as a mechanism for standard setting and accountability in global AI safety. Concurrent with her studies at York, she held a one-year, April 2024 to 2025, Science, Technology, and Policy Fellowship with the Inter-American Institute for Global Change Research, and she also completed a 4-month-long certificated program in international science diplomacy at the University of Nuremberg, Erlangen. I hope I said that correctly, in January 2024. In 2023, she completed the United Nations Summer Study Program at the New School, including a practicum with Human Rights Watch in their Economic Justice Division. I'm now going to go through some questions that we prepared for our wonderful panel. Once again, we're so delighted that you're all here. So I'm going to just pose the questions, and then I'll ask each of you to answer the questions and direct them accordingly. All right. So my first question, and we can take it in the order of Joey, Katrina, and Justin, is what made you decide to pursue graduate studies, and how did York University come onto your radar? We can start off with Joey.
I can't. Am I unmuted now?
You are unmuted, yes.
Okay, sorry. It was saying that I couldn't unmute myself.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, York came onto my radar because I was looking at a lot of programs in planetary science, and it came up, and I mean, part of what drew me to it also is that I had like limited amount of money that I could use to move somewhere. And I knew that the cost of moving to a different country would mean that if I were to study internationally, it would need to be somewhere closer to where I was coming from. So being from Ohio, looking at places in Ontario was very desirable to me. So that's kind of how it came into my radar, if that answers all the question.
Yes, thank you. What about you, Katrina? What made you decide to pursue graduate studies, and how did you decide on York?
Yeah, thank you. So at the time that I was deciding to go back to grad school, it was during the pandemic. And so everything was a bit weird at that time. I just had always had the interest in going back. At some point in the pandemic provided a good kind of breaking point to do that. And honestly, my husband, so I have a family, I have a husband and 2 kids, and basically we were constrained by my husband's work. And so he had the ability to move within North America. Initially, honestly, I wanted to go to Europe, but then when we, had that, or I thought I wanted to go to Europe, right? But then when we kind of had the constraint with his job, he was like, you better look in Canada, because we wanted to kind of leave the US for various reasons. But anyway, for the particular area that I wanted to pursue, actually, York might have the only program in science and technology studies. There's other people that study STS issues, but it may not have I don't know that there are other departments, grad programs for it explicitly. And so it just seemed like a no-brainer to come to Toronto. It's a great city, and literally, yeah, it was just the constraint of wanting to come to Canada, and the particular thing I was studying, it was really only at York.
Well, we're certainly happy that we're only at York that you could find this option.
Yeah.
All right. What about you, Justin?
Yeah, so I have been a teacher, and I've taught on university campuses for most of my career. So I've always been kind of like in this type of place, and I've just really enjoyed it. I've had breaks between all of my degrees, but I've always wanted to continue my education. And so it was kind of inevitable for me. Like I just knew at some point I would, I just didn't know when. With York in particular, my department is both linguistics and applied linguistics, and I really appreciated that because my academic background is only applied, but I wanted to branch out and be more open. And so a lot of the faculty here also were interested in what I was interested in, along with like the critical pedagogy mentioned in my bio, but also gender and then also technology and teaching and language teaching. So it was just a really nice combination of kind of where I had been, both like in my career and in my academic experience, and kind of where I wanted to go. And then Toronto, I had visited a few times before, and I knew it was a really international city, and that's the type of environment that I wanted to be in. So there were kind of multiple things from me, like personally, and then York University, and then the city that kind of drew me here.
Okay, that's wonderful. All right. I'm going to go on to my second question. So, and this is, I'd love for Joey to answer this first and then Katrina. Were there specific programs, faculty, or opportunities that stood out to you, especially? Obviously, when we consider postgraduate education, we're sometimes trying to see, is this the right program? Is this one, there's always like perhaps a plan B or even sometimes a plan C. So, let's talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that was definitely an interesting experience for me because I initially found the university because I was very dead set on looking at like observational astronomy, planetary science programs. But as I was digging into York, I saw that they also had like a huge department of laser physics and which has a lot of applications because if you like laser physics is a lot of related to the actual instrumentation of telescopes and stuff. So I was like, okay, interesting. Maybe I could learn this instrumentation portion of astronomy so that way I have a wider background going into a PhD because a lot of what I was looking at was sort of like the same like niche that I did in my undergrad. And so that's actually what I ended up pivoting to was, oh, York has all this cool stuff with lasers. I might as well take advantage of that if I'm going to go there. And so I really enjoyed, like it was unexpected. It wasn't what I prepared for, but it's very cool just that I was able to like be flexible with that and like see what they offer because now I feel like that makes me more of like a unique candidate within the field that I want to be in.
That's amazing. Katrina?
Yeah, so again, the program I was looking at was science and technology studies. And typically where those programs exist, I mean, there's a bunch in the States, university grad programs. And a lot of them are done in partnership with, in the States, are done in partnership with industry and or military, kind of things. And I didn't really want that. And so what I liked about York was that this is definitely true of STS, but I think of other disciplines at York that I'm aware of in social science in particular, that there's a lot of critical emphasis on, just, like just a more critical lens. And that appealed to me. I wanted, a place where I could, kind of speak freely and not be super constrained by like, oh, well, we have a partnership with the US military, so we can't actually do all of this, that you want to do or, things like that. And so that was appealing to me.
Right. Okay. The third question, and this is for Justin and Katrina. What appealed to you about kind of studying in Canada compared to other destinations like the US and UK? And I know that, we've talked about Toronto being an international city and Canada just overall being kind of like the deciding factor. But if you could just consider that, now that you're here and just considering what's the striking balance or the differentiation between coming here versus the US or the UK?
Me first, or
We can go with you first, yes.
okay. So I actually did apply in Europe. I applied to schools in UK and the Netherlands, and I did get in there as well. And the the financial package was not as generous as what York had offered. And particularly because I was initiating an MA after 20 years of being not in school. And so not every school or program gives generous compensation for an MA student. And so that was a huge, and all the stars ended up aligning for York basically. But, I didn't quite know going in how that would turn out. But, I did get some like award from the other schools, but York definitely was the most generous, certainly for the MA program.
Okay. What about you, Justin?
I think he's muted and he needs the host to unmute him.
Perfect. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I think we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but so first of all, in my mind, Canada was very culturally similar to the US. And after living abroad, there was kind of that factor of like I wanted to come home in some way. But there are a lot of political things happening in the US that I didn't agree with. And my partner is also an immigrant, and we really wanted to settle somewhere. And we just thought that it would be easier actually in Canada. And so that was the political situation was actually a really big deciding factor in our decision to move to Canada. And then again, we both have lived in big cities, and so we wanted to live in a big city. And Toronto, as far as I know, is the biggest city in Canada. And so that's what brought us to Toronto. In terms of the UK, we never really even considered it. I think like we had both traveled in Europe, but it just didn't provide kind of the environment that we were looking for. Just even in terms of like city size, I think it was difficult to find. But also in terms of like the programs and the opportunities, my partner is a chef and a baker. And so we were just looking for something that we really felt we could only find in Toronto. And so that's what brought us here.
Excellent. Well, again, Canada is very happy to have you, as is Toronto. Okay.
Thank you.
Next question. How has your perception of Canada matched, or have you been surprised? Have those expectations kind of, been in level with maybe perhaps what you imagined as that journey as, a postgrad student? So I'll let you answer first, Justin, and then we'll move to Joy.
Sure. Yeah, I think this ties in well with kind of my expectations that Canada is more culturally similar to the US. And of course, in many ways it is. But I lived in the South, like the southern US, which is kind of known for like their southern hospitality. So people are very friendly, very open, very warm. And then also I lived in Istanbul, and I don't know if you're familiar with like Turkish culture and Turkish people, but also very warm, very welcoming, very hospitable. And so coming to Canada, there was a little bit of a culture shock because, I mean, people are welcoming, but maybe not friendly in the same way. And so it did take a little bit of getting used to, and I think something I'm still adjusting to. Um, so not to say that people aren't friendly, I think it's just a little bit different to make friends here. Um, and then also, as I've been engaged in my studies, which focus on language education and also language policies, which connect to other type of policies, I have found that Canada may not be everything that I expected it to be in terms of policies and how they're implemented, who they benefit and who they don't. But I think in that way, I'm coming to realize there are some similarities between the US and Canada, but overall, Canada is still much more open and welcoming, and I still appreciate and I'm glad to be here.
Perfect. Joy, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I like my only perception of what a Canadian person was like this like characterized version told to like me in the US as just like overtly like friendly and nice and polite and whatever. And that was like, okay, maybe that's, but like I mean, I'm from like Appalachia. Like I'm just used to people, um, just I don't know. It's just a very different way of life because I also come from like a smaller town, and so coming here was different. I kind of experienced the same thing where it's less that people are like overtly like friendly and more just like there's less like public disturbance. Like people are more inclined to just kind of keep to themselves and not want to make a thing. Whereas I feel like in the US, it's very like for better or for worse, people are gonna like express themselves in public. So that has definitely been a shift. But it's, it's something that is like very adjustable to. It's just like, oh, okay, that's how the culture is here.
Okay, perfect. On to the next question. So, can you share what your visa or study permit experience was like, and any tips for students going through that? And I think Joey will just start with you.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so upon finding out that I got into York, like I didn't even have a passport or anything. So definitely my advice is like figure out whatever, like even if you are considering applying, like it would definitely be helpful to have the passport anyways. Like go ahead and do that if you don't have it. The fastest I could possibly take is like a month. I mean, it takes a few weeks just for it to mail in and then mail back to you. Then there's time that for them to process that. So definitely staying on top of stuff. And then in terms of the actual study, because you need that to apply for the study permit. So that process, the actual application only takes about an hour as long as you have all of your documentation ready. That doesn't take that long, but I think I submitted mine around the middle of May and I found out that I was approved at like the end of July. So definitely like get in as soon as you can because I was starting to worry like, okay, well, I'm moving in the middle of August, and I don't have this approval. So just for peace of mind, definitely
Mhm.
staying on top of that was helpful. But the actual process is pretty simple. It's just a lot of waiting.
Makes sense. All right. What about you, Katrina?
It was now a few years ago that we initially applied, so I don't totally remember, but my recollection is that it came fast. And again, maybe that was just during the pandemic. There was less. I don't know, but I agree with Joey. Like it wasn't hard. You could do it yourself. You don't need someone to do it for you. Um, it's tedious. Like I did, my whole family. You got to like add everybody and do all their info and stuff like that. But it's pretty straightforward and I think, unfortunately, well, the laws have changed recently around immigration visas. My understanding is it doesn't affect grad students. It's more undergrads that they're limiting. Um, uh, I think as a US, coming from the US, there shouldn't be any reason why you should have a problem. It's just, yeah, the timing wise, you just want to do it as soon as you get that, that you want to go.
Yeah, I think that the key thing is, like Joey said, passport should always be updated
Mhm.
whenever thinking of like travel or, studying abroad. But that's one of the key things is that it is relatively a lot simpler. Like you said, the application can be done on your own. And I'm glad to hear that it wasn't too long of a wait.
Mhm.
All right. Okay. The next question. So, what are some of the key things that helped you prepare for your move to Canada, from like finding housing to managing the whole emotional transition as well? Let's start with Justin.
Sure. So in terms of housing, especially for the PhD program, knowing I was going to be here for at least 4 years, we'll see how that process goes. But I knew I was like, well, for the first year, I can stay on campus, because I knew I would have time to kind of get to know the city and explore the city. And so the housing process for living on campus was not difficult. Especially like my program administrator was really amazing and like constantly reminding us to like, hey, apply for housing, make sure you stay on top of it. But it's also, I think, cheaper than, living anywhere else in the city. So in terms of finding housing, for me, that was really easy. Over the summer, like, because I recently moved downtown, it was also nice because I was already here, so then I could take that opportunity to go and visit places, which I definitely recommend 100%, just because there's a variety of different building styles and room styles and apartment styles for a variety of different prices. And sometimes you just don't know what you're getting into until you have a chance to see it. So it was really helpful that I was able to stay on campus and take that time before choosing where I'm at now, which I'm really happy with. And it's downtown now. I live downtown. In terms of like the emotional transition, so as I said in my bio, I've lived in a couple different countries, like I've moved before. And so for me, it really wasn't that big of a deal, so to speak, just because I'd had the experience. But I would recommend for anybody who might be moving abroad for the first time, think about the things that you enjoy doing, because when you get to that new place, you're going to have to kind of go out of your way to find those things. And we don't often reflect on like, oh, what do I like to do in my free time? Or like, what do I like doing outside of the house? And so just being aware of those things, you can even start looking for organizations or clubs or just events around the city, because there are so many in Toronto, where you can do those things that you enjoy and then start kind of preparing not just like the physical move, but also the emotional move of connecting with new people in a new city.
Perfect. All right. What about you, Joey?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing for me, like it kind of hit me in phases of like, oh, I'm moving to a different country. Oh, and the best way that I was able to sort of quell all of that and prepare was just to every question I had in my brain, I would send like 4 emails about it to whoever and try to figure out as much as I could. Like I was emailing housing to get a floor plan of the apartment that I was moving into, and I was asking a lot of questions about like trying to figure out exactly how much money it would be for me to have a car to be able to better make that decision. And, it was just a lot of asking questions to the point that I was like, I'm probably annoying these people, but like, I need to know these answers so that I can even consider figuring out how to emotionally prepare because there's just a lot of moving pieces when you're moving to a different country. I mean, especially just, with all of the documentation required and I'd sent a lot of emails asking about the specifics of my funding package to try to figure out how I could even budget because, you get a document that says, here's how much money you're going to be awarded over the whole time. So I was like, okay, well, what does that mean? Am I getting paid monthly? Like, how does it, because, I didn't have a lot in savings. I had enough, but I really needed to understand what it was actually going to be like in order for me to be ready. But in terms of the emotional transition, I think that a big part of it for me was, so much of my community was like in undergrad, seeing people hang out with them in person. And so that summer in between, I really utilized to try to figure out what relationships were important to me and how to restructure them in like in a digital way. And even with like family members and stuff too, I was like, okay, well. There are a lot of strategies I'm going to have to develop to build new community, but how can I even sustain the one that I have? Because I've always been like a very in-person person. So that was very helpful for me to like have open conversations with people like, okay, we need to figure out how to still connect even when we're far away.
Wonderful. Okay. And the next question. So, how has your academic experience at York University compared to what you expected before you arrived? We'll start with Katrina.
Wait, sorry, I got distracted by the chat. Can you repeat the question?
So, how has your academic experience at York University compared to what you expected before you arrived?
Um, it's been great. It's really met and exceeded expectations. I was really honestly the MA, I did a 12 month my MA program was 12 months and that was hard. It's like hard to do an MA in 12 months because you got to do your MRP research paper and it was like 4 classes a term. I mean, it was a lot. And that I think probably was the biggest shock of like how heavy it was. Because I think actually the MA program is more intensive than the PhD coursework, weirdly. So that was really intense. And I wasn't totally expecting. I was always like very good at school, and so I wasn't like super concerned anyway, but like that definitely was hard. And then coming back after so long, like there definitely was an adjustment. But I mean, in terms of like the quality, in terms of the caliber of other students, like everything was great. I was super happy with everything. The community was, on campus, like for my department, maybe we lucked out. I don't know, but like I got really involved with the Grad Student Association, and that connection was also very good.
Perfect. Okay. What about you, Justin?
Yeah. Kind of following that comment about like the master's work being a little more intensive than the PhD work. So I was a little surprised because my PhD work was not as difficult as I was expecting. But part of it, I think, of course, I was coming so I did a 2-year master's in applied linguistics. Again, I've stayed in my field and I've been active in my field. So like it wasn't even though I had a couple years in between, it wasn't like I was unfamiliar. Like it was doing kind of more of the same, just kind of refining and building. Um, One thing that did surprise me a little bit was in my master's program, which was also cross-listed with some PhD students. The PhD students always had extra work in those classes, but here at York, we did not. So again, kind of echoing that, like it just wasn't as intensive in some ways. Not to say the quality was low, because I mean, the classes were excellent, the faculty were great. Those were just some small things that I was expecting. Yeah, and I think that answers the question.
Perfect. Thank you. For the next question, so talk to us a little bit about how you found the sense of community at York University, both inside and outside the classroom. Let's start with you, Joey.
Okay, yeah. I mean, for me, this is definitely like an adjustment of intention because, in my undergrad, I was used to having 5 classes, 3 jobs, 4 clubs, and I was just always around people. There was a lot of overlap, and you just sort of naturally build relationships with people. Whereas here, like, I'm a TA for 2 classes, but it's like marking, it's remote, and I am in 2 classes, but there's different people in them. So for me, I think the biggest way that was helpful for me to build community was like even if there was homework and I was like, oh yeah, I feel like fine, whatever. Go if people are offering to do a study session, just go just to connect with them and see their experience. And even if I want to work from home one day, like go into my office and just take the time to have a conversation with the people there. Like that has been really helpful, especially living on campus. It's so easy to be like, okay, well, I'm done with class. I'm just going to go home the rest of the day. But just taking time to be on campus and open myself up to interacting with the community has definitely is the thing that has enabled me to make connections with people. And I mean, kind of similarly in terms of like off campus, um, just taking the train downtown, not wearing headphones, working somewhere in a cafe, like opening myself up to having conversations with people is like the biggest way that I've been able to feel connected to the community. And then also I've like, found some just like there'll be like online sessions of people doing a game night or, different clubs like that, which can be very fun because that doesn't just have to be people from Toronto, it's people all over the world. So I don't know, there's a lot of little different things I do to just connect with people like that.
That's nice to hear. Katrina, how's your kind of experience been around that community?
Yeah, sorry, I started to answer it in the last question. So yeah, I got really involved with the Grad Student Association, and we organized a conference. I mean, every year, pretty much we've organized a conference, and I've been very involved in that. And so all of the those types of activities like allow you to get to know people very, very well. And obviously they're both socially and academically, fulfilling potentially. So that's been really fantastic. I agree with Joey. Like, certainly I didn't live on campus, but, certainly the group that lives on campus, they, in my department, they were always, kind of like, oh, happy hour in our apartment, kind of thing. Not always, not all the time, but like, occasionally those would happen. And it was always really nice. Or like after class or something like that. So, again, I mean, partly it depends on the makeup of the class, I suppose. But I personally, we had a very good group, and people were really interested in getting to know each other, and so it was really nice. I also became really involved in my kids' school, and that's I've been doing a lot with that community as well. So finding other, interests and then, really pushing into those as well.
Okay, that's great to hear. This question is for Justin. So, as someone especially who's kind of lived in different countries and had a little bit more of an international background before you came to Canada, what is your favorite thing about living in Toronto and being part of the York University community?
Well, one of the first things I'll say about like the York University campus in particular, is that it is very green. There's a lot of green space around the campus, so like it's a nice place to just kind of go out and take a walk, and especially, for grad students, like if you're burnt out a little bit or kind of like stressed from studying or keeping track of all of these different things that we have to, it is a nice way to kind of just reconnect with like yourself and just take a little break in addition to doing all of these things that Joey and Katrina have already mentioned on campus. I also mentioned already, like Toronto is such an international city, and it's just really nice to just run into people from all kinds of different backgrounds, especially as an immigrant myself. And again, with my partner being an immigrant, like it's really nice to connect with people from all over the world, and kind of connect on that about like what brought you here and why are you here and what are you doing, and oh, like we're kind of going through the PR process. What did you do for that? So like there's a lot of connection. And like if you are interested in something really genuinely, you will find it here in Toronto. And so for example, like it's gonna make me sound a little bit nerdy, but I'm a PhD student, so I already am. But like Dungeons and Dragons is something that I really wanted to get into recently, and it's so easy to find so many different places around the city that are offering that. Um, Katrina mentioned kind of like having happy hours like in your like house, but there are also happy hours all over the city, and literally like some of the best people that my partner and I have connected with, we literally just met at a bar. We were all drinking, having fun. It's like, hey, what are you doing? Oh, we're doing, and like it's just a really uh like if you kind of just walk past people or walk around the city, there is kind of this idea of like, ooh, people are kind of cold or maybe unfriendly. But once you like get to know people, they're just as friendly as anywhere else. So that's what I would say. I mean, just the greenery of campus, the internationalness of the city, and because it is such a big, broad city, there's so many different things that you can definitely find anything that you're interested in.
Perfect. Yeah, I do agree with the campus. It's just lovely to take a walk in pretty much any season. It's gorgeous. All right. Okay, we're coming towards an end of the final question. So, Justin, we'll start with you just because you are unmuted. Okay, so what was the biggest cultural or lifestyle adjustment for you? And I know that, again, you've had that experience of being in different countries before, but if you just had to kind of hone it for more students coming from the US, what would be something that you would think of then?
Well, I'm also interested to hear Joey's opinion too, because I came from a big city in Turkey to a big city in Canada, and the price differences were very shocking for me. And so, I mean, Joey kind of coming from that small town to a big city, I'm interested to hear that perspective for sure. But that was surprising to me. That being said, be prepared to maybe cook a little bit more than you're used to, start looking up some recipes now, thinking about like what you can make at home. And I think those were kind of because I've talked about some other things already, so I don't need to repeat it, but I think those are some of the things that come to mind first.
Okay. Joey, let's hear your take.
Yeah, I mean, I like it at first it was kind of hard for me to understand the price difference just because the unit of money was also different anyway. So it's like, oh well, yeah, it's more because it's more. But it was definitely like an adjustment because like it just, it's more expensive being in a bigger city. So like you said, definitely reliance on cooking a lot. I mean, I already like to do that. But definitely like a lot more packing my lunch, like just getting very into like I don't know, people will be like, "Oh, you want to go to Tim Hortons?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, yeah, yeah." And then I'll just go and like, whatever. Um, just using that as a treat as opposed to I'm gonna get coffee every day, just getting very into like doing stuff on my own. But it's really not bad. I mean, especially like I think someone mentioned earlier, like the funding package is like pretty good. So I do have like some leeway. Um, but honestly, my favorite, like, it's it's like a cultural shock, but in a positive way, is like the public transportation and just like the scope of the city has been really amazing that I can pay $3 and I can go wherever I need to and get wherever I need back. Like that has been kind of like very life-changing. That has been like a very positive shift in just like the culture of how stuff works here.
Perfect. Katrina?
Um, so I agree with what everyone said. But also, especially coming with the family, like what has been hard is the fact that like for as much as coming from the US, like I came with a fair amount of privilege, you know what I mean? It's like, you're sort of just used to just occupying that space, and actually to be here on temporary status, like legally, is it's a bit challenging, and there's a lot of uncertainty. And so, you know, like day to day, it doesn't, really cause that much of an issue, but it's like, I don't have 100% certainty that we're going to get status after I graduate. You know what I mean? So it's like, we're at this point, we're here now. We've been here 5 years, and it's like my kids are my, older child's in grade 11, the younger one's in grade 8. And so it's like, there's a lot of uncertainty and I don't really know what's going on. And so that, having to sort of like reorient in that configuration was sort of, I didn't really think about how challenging that would be, like sort of mentally, but also financially and also like in other capacities. So, it's again, it's not like really causing day-to-day issues, but it definitely is weird. But yeah, otherwise, yeah, the city is fantastic. I would say it's a more diverse city. I'm from Los Angeles, and I would say like in terms of like how it feels and like hearing different languages on the street and, and it just being super diverse, like not just non-white or non-English speaking, but like just genuinely diverse is like really, really nice.
Perfect. I think so that could lead on to the next question, Katrina, just continuing what do you wish you had known before coming to York University in Canada? Is that kind of that, or would you like to answer
Yeah.
differently?
I mean, yeah, like I guess there's nothing like no like gotcha, like no big like, oh my gosh, I wish I had known that. But yeah, no, I mean, I guess just the immigration process. I just wish I had really thought about that a bit more, like kind of what the like long term of that would, how that like could maybe not go our way and then what that would mean. I guess those are things I would have really wanted to think about maybe a bit more.
Justin, is there anything you wish that you had known before coming to York or
Well,
Canada?
I think that's a great point too. I mean, I'm still early in my PhD program, so I still have a couple years to figure that out. But I mean, it is something that like I think about all the time. So I definitely agree, and thank you for bringing that up, Katrina. I would also say, I mean, so you can see all of our backgrounds. There's some snow on the ground. So if you're coming from a place that's a bit warmer, it doesn't get snow. I would say just be prepared for winter because I mean, I've only been here 2 years, but I was asking everybody last year, like, what is the winter going to be like? What is the winter going to be like? And everyone's like, oh, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. And then there was like the most snow that there'd been in like 5 or 10 years or something. So you just never know what you're going to get, but I would recommend being prepared for cold and for snow.
Perfect. What about you, Joy?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I wish like I had looked more into is like the geography of the city because I was like, oh yeah, it's Toronto, it's a big city, whatever. But like I don't think I was like expecting the fact that it's so huge that you can ride the train for an hour and still be in Toronto. So I think that's something that I wish I would have known of just like what the scale of it is, like where York is in relation to the rest of Toronto, because that would have helped me get a head start of getting into the routines of going downtown and making a list of things that I want to visit and want to see.
Okay. And this is going to be our final question for everyone. So, you know, we have a lot of students who are, looking at York University or Canada as a destination for their postgraduate studies. So, what advice would you give to students currently deciding where to pursue their graduate studies? We can start with you, Joey.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I just went through this process last year, so it still feels like I still am feeling like the stress in my chest of like you just bringing that up. But honestly, I mean, advice that I got, which is like why I'm here in a master's program, is it is like oh, like applying for a PhD program, like that is, that's a very important decision. You're going to live there for, maybe like 5 years or something. Like that is really valuable. And so for me, coming out knowing I wanted to pursue my studies, but maybe not being totally sure where I wanted to live, it was very helpful that York had master's programs and that I could apply for that because, it's like a 2-year commitment and if I fall in love with Canada, I can continue my education and stay here. And if not, I can go somewhere else. But, I mean, I've been enjoying my time, but I guess that would be my advice is like really make sure that you do the research to places that you want to fully commit to. But also be open to learning new things and not knowing exactly how stuff is going to go because that's how you actually learn from experiences is by being open to experiencing things that you would never have before.
Perfect. Katrina?
Okay, I want to just add one little thing to one thing I would have done differently. Cross-border accountant. If you have any asset in the US, you need a cross-border accountant. Leave it there. But anyway, so I would say, you're coming for school, right? You're for grad school or whatever. And I would say I would prioritize making sure that the academic fit is right and reaching out to the to the department head, and definitely researching the faculty and making sure that there are at least 2 or 3 people that really seem to align, more or less with what you want to do, because, and that you've reached out to them ideally. Because what ultimately, what happens is someone comes for one person and then that person is like on leave or something happens, they're not taking on new students or they're not accessible for some other reason. So definitely make sure that there's a few different sort of avenues that you can really pursue, just in terms of like mentorship and your supervisor. So that's the first thing. And then, yeah, I mean, definitely if, whatever you can do to make sure the cultural fit is right. But, I would say Toronto is there's like something for everyone. I wouldn't be super concerned about that, but it is, the cold, I mean, there are distinct things about it. So definitely make sure that that fits for you.
Justin, any advice that you have?
I mean, I think my advice is fairly similar to what's already been said. Just do your research. And I think that's especially important at the PhD level, where, it's a balance, right? Between you have to be self-motivated as a PhD student. There's a lot of things that you're going to have to do by yourself, and motivate yourself to do. But also, like Katrina said, I mean, if you're coming for one person, like in the 2 years that I've been here, like half the department was on sabbatical, and then now this year the other half is on sabbatical. And so, I mean, it's never for sure that if there's that one particular person that year, for whatever reason, they might not just be available. And even before coming and even before applying, I was going to webinars. I was contacting the graduate program advisor and asking for a meeting. And so like doing that research and connecting with the department, I think will help with that academic and cultural, like grad culture department fit. And I guess one last thing I'll say, well, maybe 2 last things. So for all grad students, I mean, remember that faculty and advisors are people too. And so, when you're looking kind of online at their like online bios and their publications, you may form an idea about them, and maybe that idea is true or maybe it's not. But, like, again, that's just part of that research and trying to connect with them beforehand. And for MA students, I would also just remind, or master students, sorry, it's MA in my department, but master's students in general. Grad school is different than being an undergrad. There's a little bit more of that self-motivation that's needed, but you're also closer to being a colleague with your faculty and professors than you are a student. Just like the relationship is different. And you are also different. You have more knowledge. And so don't be afraid to bring that knowledge, bring that experience into the classroom, and really capitalize on that during your experience.
Perfect. Thank you so much to all the panelists. Eileen, you can go ahead and read some questions that we have for our wonderful panelists here.
Just having a look at the Q&A. Katrina, I don't know if you answered about family housing, because I think the question went to maybe Joey and Justin, but
Yeah.
how was finding housing for you, being in a family situation?
Okay. Housing in Toronto is tight. It's getting better in the last few years, but it when we came initially, it was bananas. It was so tight. So initially we used a company called Rent It Furnished, and by the way, we came with 3 dogs, and one of them was 100 pounds, and the other one was a pit bull. So we were like not great renters. Um, but anyways, the Rent It Furnished found us something actually that was amazing. It was a little on the small side, but amazing. That was furnished, and we stayed there less than a year actually for various reasons. But initially the contract was a year. And then from there, we found something. Yeah, I mean, I would say I've been very unimpressed with Toronto landlords. Like, it's not, it's not great. Like the protections for tenants are not as good as in California, for example. So that has definitely been annoying. Um, but as I said, the market seems to be loosening up a little bit. So actually, we're on our 3rd place now. We've been here, I guess, yeah, going on 5 years, and we're in our 3rd place. So again, I mean, it's like with that temporary existence, like it's definitely not ideal for a family of 4 to be, moving around every year and a half or 2 years. But that's just sort of the nature of what it is. And anyway, yeah, so it's tricky. But yeah, the first place was a rental company we used because we just had no idea and we needed something. And then we were able to find just on the regular market, just on Zillow and that sort of thing. So we did find something.
Okay. I mean, to answer the question as well, York, if you wanted to live on campus, there are family units, but I mean, if you want to live in the city, sometimes people even live like in the suburbs as well. Like York is very much a commuter campus. So if you wanted to live, like Usman lives in Mississauga and commutes, and people will live like really up to a 2-hour radius in any direction. So that's on the table as well. Another question that I think kind of was answered in the questions, but I'm going to re-up it just because it did come from someone directly. The biggest cultural adjustment you faced. Yeah, and I think it's funny, just as someone coming obviously from the Canadian perspective, it's like little things like hearing grade 8 instead of 8th grade. Like there's such tiny things, and then sometimes such huge things. Like when you're all of you are briefly touching on transit in Toronto, I'm like, well, it's amazing in Toronto, but Toronto's a huge urban city, a huge urban center in the country, so it's definitely different elsewhere. But anyway, yes, biggest cultural adjustment that you haven't mentioned yet, or anything like that.
Yeah, and then the irony for Americans is that when you compare Toronto to like London, it's like the system here is terrible. You know what I mean? So it's like it's just what depends on what you're used to. I can talk. I don't know if anyone wants to go first, but okay. So my big cultural like shock, like the first couple of months we were here, was I was in the Old Navy with my kids, and and it was kind of empty, and we walked straight into the fitting room and just started using the fitting room. And then a lady came and she's like, "I'm sorry, you're supposed to check in with us before you use the fitting room." And I was like, "What?" I'm like, I feel like I'm like the like brash American, like whatever. And anyway, that's happened a few times. That type of thing happened where I'm just kind of like, just going places and people are like, "Oh, you're not supposed to do that." So, so yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's just more cultural. And then same with the schools. It's like when I see a problem, I'm like very vocal about it. And people are not accustomed to that, I think, doing that as much. I think Joey mentioned that earlier. But I feel like once you sort of break the ice, then people kind of come around. But it's like to be that first person to be like, "Oh, this is a problem." Like that's like they need someone to help them with that. So the Americans help.
I will echo that last point also. I am definitely kind of more outgoing and more straightforward than a lot of my Canadian colleagues, but kind of like absolutely, Katrina. Like once somebody says something,
Yeah.
then it kind of opens the door
Yeah.
for everyone else. And I guess it's the American in me that is not afraid to be the first one to
Yeah,
say, like,
exactly.
what about this?
Yeah, and I think for me, you mentioned like terminology, which I didn't even think about this until you just said that. But I think the biggest cultural difference I experience is when I'm TAing and grading stuff, like all the terminology of like marking instead of grading, invigilation instead of proctoring. Like there's all this stuff that I had to be like, what are you guys talking about? And then
Yeah.
even like grading assignments when like words are spelled differently. I'm like, okay, no, they spell like this. It's fine. Like that's definitely taken some getting used to.
That's too funny because when you sent your bio, when you said honors, I was like, oh, that's the American spelling of honor. Um, which is, I mean, it's there's neither right nor wrong. It's right from where it came from. It just is different here. But the it made me think when you all mentioned it, kind of the like being more maybe outgoing or like being in a place where there's more people are more likely to maybe interact or be outgoing. The thing of what is it? Positive politeness and negative politeness. And I think it's much more of an urban thing where it's like negative politeness is like minding your business and being keeping to yourself is being polite. But if you were to go into like a smaller region of Canada, like it's much more um I won't say like the American South necessarily, but there is like people talk to each other much more and there's much more interaction, I suppose. But since this is a webinar just for Toronto, I mean, if you have the chance and opportunity to explore outside of Toronto, obviously Canada's great, and but for going to school, yeah, that makes me think of that and those differences. Someone had asked if you need a car. I don't know. Any of you have a car, utilize a car or transit?
I do not have a car.
So I mean, Katrina, I know that you kind of typed a response, but I was also just adding to it. So Joey mentioned earlier that there is a train that goes from York University like to downtown. It does take 45 minutes to an hour, depending on where you're trying to go in the city. There are also lots of buses. Same thing though, they're dependent on traffic, and there is a lot of traffic in Toronto, especially closer to downtown. One thing that I kind of ran into and I was surprised by staying on campus is that there's not really a great grocery store within walking distance. Like I would go to, there's like a Walmart that was like a 10 to 15 minute bus ride. I mean, I did walk there like when the weather was nice, so, like walk there for like half an hour and then take the bus or an Uber back, depending on what I had. So I do think, I mean, especially for Americans who are used to driving everywhere, like I had a car since I was like 15. Like it is a little bit of an adjustment living on campus. And I do think it's a little difficult without a car, not impossible by any means. But there's going to be some extra kind of steps you have to think about. And then downtown, like now that I live downtown, I don't feel the need to have a car at all.
I have a
Awesome.
car. We have one car for our family. And I usually my husband takes it, so usually I'm taking transit places. My daughter also plays hockey. We definitely need a car for the hockey. So I do know families downtown that do not have cars. So it is like Torontonians, especially ones that live downtown in certain areas, like they're very like kind of crunchy people. They can be. Sorry to
Oh yeah, no,
artists,
100%.
but like, but there like there's not everybody, of course, but like, there's definitely a vibe where it's like, oh, we take transit or we bike everywhere. In the winter, people are biking, like in snow biking, that kind of thing. So there is that for sure if you want to like take that on. I'm not quite there yet. But I do, I do take bus and subway and stuff. And sometimes like, you know, it's like I would say, Torontonians, like the kind of, fancier Torontonians, like definitely, I'm from LA. It's sort of that vibe where they're in their nice cars and they're driving around everywhere and they're, fancy cars. Like that definitely is there also. But I would say like there's absolutely people that take transit everywhere and I'm one of those people.
Yeah, I think it's really hardcore for people who bike in the winter. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
but there are a significant amount of people dedicated to it, so it's definitely like a hallmark of that.
totally.
I think or if someone is like considering coming to Toronto and you want to rely on transit, like you can get significant student discounts. I guess one thing we have over Transport for London is that we don't have zones and like it's one fare from, almost Mississauga to almost Pickering, but they do have us beat on, the whole map thing
Yeah.
situation. But that was all the attendee questions. Is there anything that any of you would like to share that kind of didn't come up in questions or that you like wanted to mention at the end of the session?
One last little thing that I just thought of as you were talking about the transportation. So you can also transfer for free between different types of transportation. So like if you go from a train to a bus or a bus to train, etc., like there's no fee for that, as long as it's within like I think like a 2 hour span or something. So that is nice. Like you literally just pay one fare to get from point A to point B. And again, the base fare is like three something, but then if you have a student discount, it's less as well. So yeah, that was just one thing that I just thought of.
Yeah, excellent point. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think for me, one thing that I forgot to mention that was like a big thing to figure out was banking
Mm,
and finding like trying to find an institution prior to going and like setting up an appointment so that I could get that as soon as I was in the country. And also just like really asking a lot of questions because it like I just had this idea that I could just get a bank account here and then I could just transfer money to it from my US account and it would just be fine. But there are a lot of like difficulties in some banks that don't require that, and you have to see what your like domestic bank allows because like I know my bank doesn't allow international wire transfers. So it was a very complicated process, but definitely like look into that before you arrive because you're going to want to get that set up as soon as possible so you can even start receiving your financial aid.
mm. Yeah, we don't utilize like Cash App, Zelle, like that kind of thing. So it's yeah, completely different banking.
Yeah.
Katrina, anything else? Or?
Also finance related, along the lines of the cross-border account, Americans need to file an FBAR, which you have to declare all of your accounts in Canada, to the US government by like April 15th. If they ever at any point in the year crossed over $10,000 US. So,
Mm,
um, they'll fine you heavily if you don't fill that out.
wow. Okay. Good to know. Yeah. Make cross-border accountant get call back to what you had said before. Okay. So Uzma, I'll hand it back to you to wrap up.
Well, thank you once again to our panelists for joining us, and I'm sure that all of our attendees will definitely find this insightful and hopefully, just gives them more confidence in deciding to come to Canada and to York University. Thank you so much to our attendees for taking out the time from your busy day. And if you have any questions, please continue to reach out to us at fgsapply@yorku.ca. I will wrap up now. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of the day.